Hello there, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan, and I finally outsmarted the Dolphins by hiding in the last place they would ever expect me to be in, and that is in their own backyard, the ocean. So if the Dad Batch continues to follow the same kind of trajectory as the Dadalorian, we're going to assume that a lot of people, like half the galaxy, will be going after the very sweet and lovable Omega. Protect her at all costs, for she will bring light and innocence wherever she goes, just like the baby Yoda. Hallowed be thy name. Anyway, in our last episode of the Dad Batch, we can add one more party that's interested in Omega, the elite assassin, hand-to-hand combat expert, and marksman Fennec Shand. Today our goal is to try to figure out who exactly has hired Fennec Shand to hunt down our precious Omega. Unfortunately, all the information we have on Fennec Shand comes from the post-Imperial period during the Dadalorian TV series. Some 2-bit Corellian bounty hunter Toro Calican is after his first big score, which happens to be Fennec Shand. Fennec at this point is on the run. Ever since the New Republic took over the galaxy, they've waged a war against the criminal syndicates that were allowed to operate in the gray areas where the Empire looked the other way. Fennec was one of their employees. Despite being a militarized police state, Imperial officials were notorious for having dealings with criminal scum, just like every other Republic government before it. The Mandalorian seems to be well acquainted with who she is as well, and adds a bit more information about Fennec Shand. Apparently, she's a deadly assassin who takes out targets for all of the major criminal syndicates, including the feared Hutt cartels. But being an assassin for criminals doesn't necessarily mean that she's some kind of psychopathic mass murderer. Well, maybe she is a mass murderer, but we shouldn't judge, books by their cover or something. As a matter of fact, Fennec Shand shows all the characteristics of an assassin with a heart of gold, which is actually a very similar character class to the hooker or gigolo with the heart of gold, or the oil executive hedge fund bro with the heart of gold. Fennec Shand seems to have no hesitation shooting scum like Biff Fortuna's enforcers, the same enforcers Luke probably choked out during his own adventure to Jabba's palace. Anyway, the point is, I'm sure Fennec Shand has killed hundreds of criminal thugs in her career. Criminal scum who really don't add anything positive to the world, so Fennec Shand is doing a service by getting rid of them, in my opinion. At the same time, we've seen some compassionate behavior on Fennec Shand's part. She frees a slave that looks very familiar to another Twi'lek from the original trilogy, Lin Mei, who also happens to be an ageless Asian beauty, just like Fennec Shand, who's portrayed by the 57-year-old Ming-Na Wen. Hopefully when I'm 57, I'll also look like a beautiful Asian woman as well. Anyway, Fennec Shand isn't the type of individual to create wanton destruction while doing her mission. She's way too professional for that kind of nonsense. I also detect a certain amount of goodness coming from her. The way she approaches Omega, even though it's under false pretenses, seems far from menacing. Fennec also seems to have her own sense of honor and code. After Boba Fett saves her from a very painful gut wound, she devotes her entire life to him. Now, the most obvious benefactor that Fennec Shand could have would be the Empire. Tarkin has issued orders to hunt down Clone Force 99 after they disobeyed a direct order to take out Saw Gerrera and his partisans. Darth Vader was also famous for employing bounty hunters to get things done that the average buckethead was either too unskilled to do or just way too visible to do. So the Empire wasn't below hiring mercenaries to get their dirty business done. But then again, it's very unlikely Tarkin knows who exactly Omega is, or even cares about retrieving her. The only reason Omega ends up locked up with the Bad Batch on Kamino is because she was snooping around Clone Force 99's quarters when the clone shock troopers came in to confiscate their equipment. We're not even sure if Tarkin knows that Omega is an enhanced clone. More importantly, Fennec Shand was sent after Omega and not after Clone Force 99, which makes me suspect that it isn't Tarkin who has sent this bounty hunter. If Tarkin sent Fennec Shand, he most likely would have had her target the entire group of clones. It is possible that Tarkin has learned about Omega's importance, but up until this point, not even the audience knows what makes Omega so special, other than being adorable and full of childlike wonder that a degenerate adult like me will never recapture. Now, someone like Palpatine might know more about her situation, especially if Omega is Force sensitive, but in that case, he would send his own enforcers and not necessarily bounty hunters. It also seems against Fennec Shand's character to serve the Empire, especially knowing that she mainly works with criminal syndicates and also enjoys busting stormtroopers' heads open with giant boulders like their cartoon villains. But this is much earlier on in her career, so we can't rule out that possibility. So which criminal syndicates are active during this period of time? Towards the end of the Clone Wars, Maul and Savage Opress formed a massive criminal enterprise known as the Shadow Collective. It was made up of Death Watch, the Black Sun, the Pike Syndicate, the Hutt clans, and Crimson Dawn. Maul and his brother Savage Opress used brutal measures to unite the criminal organizations. This led to the destruction of the Black Sun High Command along with several Hutt crime lords. The Pike Syndicate was a little smarter. They volunteered to join forces and avoided a massacre. Needless to say, all of these formerly proud criminal organizations were a shadow of what they once were. Hence, the Shadow Collective. Nice. Maul had sensed the chaos that would come with the end of the Clone Wars, and so during the height of the Siege of Mandalore, he actually commands his crime bosses to lay low until the foreseeable future. Maul would also be keeping a low profile during this time after narrowly escaping Order 66 himself. With his contacts destroyed and his organization in hiding, I doubt he would be able to gain access to information about Omega. He's probably too terrified of Palpatine at this point to do anything for a while. And we all know the only thing that Maul really cares about is Kenobi. The Hutts, on the other hand, actually benefited greatly from Maul's actions. The death of so many of their leaders created a vacuum for Jabba the Hutt of Tatooine to consolidate all of the Hutt forces underneath his own power. He most likely has prior connections to Fennec Shand as well. As the Mandalorian stated before, Fennec Shand was employed by the Hutts. And when we first see her in The Mandalorian, she's hiding on Tatooine, which is where Jabba the Hutt is. The Hutts also have a really close relationship with the Empire and managed to keep most of their autonomy during the Galactic Civil War. The Hutts are really good at profiting from both sides and remaining neutral during a conflict. And so they seem like a likely candidate for sponsoring Fennec Shand on her mission to capture Omega. But the question still remains, how do they know about her and why do they want her? So who knows about Omega's existence outside of the Kaminoans and the Empire? Another fellow clone, the son and identical copy of Jango Fett, Boba Fett. Boba Fett spent his formative years on Kamino until the pesky Jedi Obi-Wan Kenobi came along and forced him and his father to leave. This was around 3 to 4 years before the events of the Bad Batch. Even if Omega is a clone with advanced aging, it's very likely that Boba Fett would have ran into her on one occasion or another. More importantly, I believe that Omega is a female version of Boba Fett, which means Omega is potentially Boba Fett's sister. By the end of the Clone Wars, the capable Boba Fett had already started his own criminal syndicate, so he does have the resources and connections to hire someone like Fennec Shand. When Boba Fett saves Fennec many years later on Tatooine, we don't know it's the first time he's seen her. Perhaps they have a prior history. Boba Fett during his earlier years was quite volatile and angry. He had seen his father beheaded by Mace Windu and had been consumed by his grief and desire for revenge. It's possible that Boba Fett during his teenage years still yearned for family and a connection. Perhaps that's why he's gone after Omega, his sister. The last suspect we're going to examine in this case is the Kaminoans themselves. They are the only individuals who know what Omega is. During Clone Force 99's escape with Omega, Nala Se actually secretly helps them. And she doesn't even let Prime Minister Lama So know about her aiding the clones. Now, I don't believe that Nala Se has a soft spot for the clones. She's clearly as ruthless as all of the other Kaminoan scientists. She sees the clones as property and scientific achievements. But she clearly values the enhanced clones and wants to keep them out of the reach of the Empire. Lama Su also commands Nala Se to say nothing about Omega until the Empire's intentions are clear, which potentially means that Omega might be a bargaining chip the Kaminoans can use to secure a future contract with the Empire. The primary motivation for the Kaminoans is to make sure that the steady stream of credits they're getting from Imperial contracts never disappear. Their entire planet's economy depends on it. And one should never underestimate a desperate Dolphinkin. Once they smell blood in the water, they go on a killing frenzy. Perhaps Omega is the secret to a new, even more deadly type of clone that could convince the Empire to keep the clones. And while Nala Se wanted the Bad Batch to take Omega away from Kamino to keep her out of the Empire's hands, she'll most likely also want to keep an eye on Omega herself, which is why Fennec Shand is ordered to retrieve Omega alive, not dead. It is also possible that Nala Se does have feelings for Omega. The young clone is adorned with a Kaminoan jewelry headpiece, like the one Nala Se has on her head. It's very rare for a Kaminoan to teach a clone about their own culture, so perhaps Nala Se sees some worth in Omega, which is why she's introduced this cultural custom to her. But this might also be the reason why she would not let Lama Su know about her aiding the clone's escape. She doesn't want to expose her feelings to the Prime Minister. It's also entirely possible that there are some unknown actors out there we don't really know about. And also, you, the fans, usually have some pretty good ideas, so float some towards me, because I gotta get out of here and I gotta close this light because it attracts dolphins. They usually come out at nighttime. I'll see you guys next time.